presentation for this. I don't have a PowerPoint. All right. I do have some things that I will interject with and add as we go. But in terms of how these are normally run, this is not it, right? Because I think that an emphasis on not just how we connect with students, but how students connect with students in your classes is probably one of the most important things that we can do to emphasize. And creating those situations is probably a great starting point to that. One of the things that I emphasize in my GNST class for the students that are just getting started here at MCC is to make connections with each other. And somehow, some way to form those connections, because we all know that when things start getting tough, you might ask your instructor, and that's great, but you're more likely to ask somebody else that's in your class, what did you do for this project? What are you thinking for this problem? Okay. And so not only is working to establish those channels, no, that's not a Teams pun, but also, encouraging that interaction early on. And sometimes it's little things like encouraging all of your students to have a profile in Canvas. I would bet that if you did a little poll in your courses at the start of the term and just said something simple like, how many of you, when you got on this Canvas course, went to the people section to see who you were taking this course with? I know that that's something that I used to always do and still do when I get assigned a class. Who's in this class? Are there any former students of mine from when I was teaching high school? Are there any names that I might recognize? Things like that, okay? And it's something that's low level that you probably don't even think twice about, but it's an opportunity for connections. And you might go a little bit further and you might read a bio, okay? And encourage students to fill out those bios, okay? Encourage them to be humans outside. I'm here to become a nurse. Well, that's great, but what else do you like to do? Because somebody else in that class might look at that and say, yeah, that's something that I like to do too. I like to hunt, okay? I like to play basketball, things like that, all right? So what I want to do is, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the technology. I will interject. I have some things in mind, but I just want to open it up to conversation in terms of how do you encourage peer-to-peer connection in your course or courses? What are some things that you can do that can share with others here? And I'm going to pull my chair off to the side out on the front here, and I'm just going to sit back and chat. Tracy.
Okay, so when I taught 108 and in medical terminology, we would have a, I guess, discussion board assignment, right? And then they would have to go in, tell about themselves, and I would have 3 things like, what's your name, what's your interest, what's your favorite song, something. And then it all trickle in, you would see them start just interacting that way. And then I would encourage the bios. And we get like half, we'll do them, but it was just something.
That's a good one. So discussions in Canvas with some prompts in terms of just 3 things. Do you assign points to that?
Yes, 5 points for one.
Little bit of pay, I guess.
Yeah.
In the form of a grade. And you do it right away, like first week?
It's the first assignment.
Yeah. Good. How do you get your hand up?
I was just gonna piggyback off of that. This was an unintended, but good thing that happened. I had a content discussion board. Students could pick any microorganism and tell us its name and what it eats and what it looks like, blah, blah, blah. But I added a bullet point, tell us why you picked it. And then seeing why they picked it, like I had a student this semester who's like, my baby got really sick when she was born, and there was a totally rare thing, and it took them like a month to figure out. So the engagement went through the roof when these like personal stories started tying into the content piece. And so now I'm really glad I do it, and I purposely added into some of my other pieces as well.
So a discussion, but with personal stories.
Mm-hmm.
How many of you had try to pull out personal stories in your course or courses? What do you do, Don?
First day of physics class, I asked them, what's the most interesting, bizarre thing they've ever seen that they have difficult time explaining?
Give us an example.
Weird answers, really general, but typically it's like some people have seen, a tornado or it's ball lightning or something incredibly odd. And some people will just say, well, I saw this and I couldn't figure out why it's doing that. Which is kind of what I'm looking for, those kinds of questions.
And
It's
it-
not like a book, if you spin it this way, it spins fine. Spin it this way, it twists in all crazy directions.
And it perks their interest because it's something a little bit different that they might have experienced, real life experience. And another piece that kind of goes with that is you start putting personal touches on things and you AI proof it a little bit as well. A conversation or a question came up last week from one of our instructors in terms of, I think this is not to go down the AI road right now, okay, but just as an example, you know how I go on tangents. What do I do? I think that this was written by AI, and I said, there's a good chance, and your detection software is not going to do anything for you, okay? But one of the ways that you can work to use that as a deterrent is to put personal touches on that. And the other side of that is you create those connections and a touch point for students to connect with each other.
Something. So I used like a bingo card, but it had all of these different activities and I had an MCC. So the first person that you connect with 5 people to get your bingo card filled is going to go to the app. And it had a mug and I was like, so the next person who gets their bingo card filled and it's their whole bingo card filled, which means that they've talked to all of the students that they couldn't use the same people more than twice. But they filled their bingo cards and then because it's a face-to-face, I was able to give them give them presents. And they had to, the bingo things were find a person in the class or a person in the class that has done this, that's traveled to a different country, someone, and then I moved something around me and used the, because I'm teaching a psychology class. So it was like that I added in some of the things that are psychology based, so it was personal to that end, but again, a little incentive was never hurts.
I like the bingo icebreaker. I also love icebreakers, just for the simple fact that I always hated icebreakers, and I still do. And everyone groans when you say you're gonna do an icebreaker, no matter what the icebreaker is. But if you take a step back and also make them take a step back after it's done, to say, look how much energy is in this place right now. Like you were uncomfortable, you hated it when I announced it, and now look what's happening, and bingo's a good one. Now, my question would be, how do you take bingo and make it across modalities? Like you said, it was face to face.
Yeah.
How could we do this in a online, or how could we do this in a LOL class?
So for me, I think you still have the same assignment. It just means that outside of the parameters like a discussion board. So you're still reaching out to other students to find out. And I would also offer that maybe your price might be a little bit more, like a hat. Yeah, if I'm sitting face to face and I'm coming to class anyway, then a hat's cool. But
Yeah.
maybe your incentive is like a gift card or something, which kind of which adds to the motivation factor.
No, I think that's a good one too, to acclimate them to something like Teams. So I know a lot of you are using, Microsoft Teams, whether it be, just channels or private channels, but you could also show them the chat feature and have students reaching out to one another with chats to ask those questions, things like that. Because I don't know about you, but I have had more Teams chat message questions from students this term than past terms. I don't know what it is, but they're using Teams like crazy just to ask quick questions about assignments as they're working on them. And I can get back, not that I can't get back to them real quick in an email, it's just a little different, and then a lot of them are probably doing it from their mobile device. They don't have to, hey, topic, question, and then write the email. They can send an image easier and they can respond with a GIF real quick, and the GIFs are kind of their nature as far as what they're used to and how they're used to communicating. They can use emojis and things like that. So using tools that they're comfortable with, we hear these, they're digital natives. Like, let's blow that up real quick. They're natives with what they want to be comfortable with. All right. What we've heard time and time again is when it comes to Canvas, they are lost. And I see conductors shaking their head like, yep. Okay, and that's why we're going to be working towards a student orientation to help out with that. But if you can use something like Teams and get them acclimated on it as well, not just to communicate with you, they're probably going to then be able to communicate with each other to ask questions. And they don't have to be like, I want to be weird and ask somebody for their number. That's kind of uncomfortable. It sounds like, well, just ask for their number. It gets kind of in the weird territory a little bit. As weird as that sounds to us. Okay, but we have a platform called Teams that allows them to send chat messages real quick to each other to ask those questions and use a lot of the functionalities that they're natives with. What else you got? I've got some good ones so far.
I like that, point, I think maybe having some exercise at the beginning, to encourage them to chat message each other. Because of the myths to teach them how to do that. Helpful and get them over that.
Does anybody do any sort of acclimation or Teams icebreaker sort of thing in Teams to encourage communication? Heather, what do you do?
In the general channel, the first week they have to do the introductory post, and I have some prompts there, like you said, like it could be about your major, but I also specifically say include, your favorite song and why it's meaningful, or put pictures of your family and your pets up, or blah, that kind of thing. And that's important because we use private collaborative channels, which again is peer-to-peer interaction.
Yeah.
And it's setting them up to be in Teams, to know how to use it, and that kind of thing, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say the group channels or just group work in general, but then they just get used to their group and then you see all this chatter there on the general page, so, yeah.
Yeah, so I do something along the same lines and do private channels as well. And probably the biggest thing that I see with that is making sure that they understand how to reply, the difference between replying to a prompt and starting a new one. That's the tripping point at the start right there.
And setting the notifications, because when they weren't as familiar with Teams, conversations would be going on and they pop on like 3 days later and they'd be like, oh my God, I missed so much.
Right.
And so that purposely built in both of those tips into my first couple of weeks.
If you want to hop on the Teams connection bandwagon, we're happy to have you. But a couple quick hitters to remember, and Heather brought up the one, is the notifications. If you're added to a team, you don't get channel notifications automatically. Good, bad, whatever. So what you need to do is make sure that your students know to either A, turn on those notifications, or when somebody's posting, make sure you tag the channel in the post, and then they will get notifications for a tag. That is by default set to on.
Training.
Yeah. Well, it's in the instructor and student resources area. I can spotlight those and send those out. But yeah, I know that's like a jungle of information, and it's kind of hard to fight your way through it.
Said, if we create a team in Canvas, they don't get notifications about that team until they set it themselves.
They don't get notifications unless they enable the notifications for the channel, or they will get a notification if you say @Michelle or @team channel name. Yep.
So if I, the very first day at the mall, they'll start to get a notification, or just for that?
Just for that one. Yeah, just for that one. So if you're the instructor, you might say on that first day as you're going over it, here's how you turn on channel notifications. That's probably the best way to do it. The second best way is say, hey, if you want to make sure somebody sees something and it's not a chat, make sure that you tag them. I just always tag no matter what, because I know that some probably might have them on and some might have them off. So Teams.
I was just gonna say, for those of you that haven't used the channels or the private channels very much, whatever you named it, you could say the name of the channel and it'll hit everybody in that channel. You don't have to tag them all individually.
I'm just checking the chat.
Kristen had her hand up a while ago. I don't know if she still wants to share or not.
Oh, I was just going to say that in my initial discussion post, I do ask them, well, they have to do a PowerPoint or a video about themselves, and there's criteria they have to cover. But one of the things is like, tell me about your favorite class or your worst class experience, things like that. And they seem to bond over that. So best or worst.
I dig it. That's good. That's connecting right there. It's easy to gloss over these everyday topics because we do get so focused on what we're supposed to accomplish and tackle in our class that we sometimes forget the human element of it. Okay. And so obviously we're here today because we're trying to make those connections, but what are the topics that you've noticed that students like to connect on? What's that? Pets.
Music.
So I heard, what's your favorite song, stuff like that. You know, you could even use something like Microsoft Whiteboard to post a video for students in one place. So, you know, we talk about, I know that some of you probably cringe in your head when you hear Canvas discussions. And you're like, another discussion for the students. So right away, we're gonna end with a discussion, okay? And if you love discussions, that's fine too. I know that we all like different tools. But I know that some of you are bored with the same old discussion. And it's kind of like linear and it just goes that way. You can use a lot of different tools. Microsoft Whiteboard is a very easy tool to use. Okay, and your students have access to it as well. And they can easily plop a video. If you have them sharing videos, maybe it's their favorite song, maybe it's a video they made, things like that. They can plop a video right within the whiteboard space, and it's all in one space for them to see. Padlet is another one. Canva. You ever use Canva? Canva's an awesome tool. I just went to a conference last Thursday and Friday, and Canva is like exploding. So if you've never used Canva to design anything, I might do a session on Canva just to show you how to use it. I've been using it like crazy. And if you ever thought that my designs look really well, I'm cheating. Okay, I'm using Canva. There's a free account. If you upgrade to a pro account, it's like $130 a year. So it's really cost efficient as well. Like, I think that that's like stealing for what you can do. There's so many different templates. And they also have a whiteboard space with a lot of options there as well. So if you ever needed to do a digital whiteboard and invite people outside of MCC into it, you can't do that on Microsoft Whiteboard, but you can do it if you want to use Canva. So that's another way if you wanted to connect, kind of change things up a little bit. Thanks for getting us down that path, Kristen. What else? What are some other topics that you might connect over that you've seen work well?
I have my students occasionally have assignments where they post photos or that they put up memes to explain how they're feeling at the moment. They seem to bond over that.
And I like the meme thing. I have them post to the Teams channel on memes, but you could do it obviously in Canvas discussions. Feelings checks periodically. I think that's another way that if not, and I know that most of the time when we do like wellness checks and feelings checks, that we just do it so that we can see it as the instructor. But it might also be a way for students to connect and kind of commiserate with each other. Not that they don't do it already, but they're like, oh my gosh, I thought you were killing this class and you're stressed. Me too. You know, they put on that front and it might stop them from being connected. That's a good one. What is an example of, give me an example of a time that you have seen students connect like never before in your class? Elizabeth.
So we do this advertising in the advertising class. And they reach out to local, so it's outreach, right? They are doing a service for a local business. And it was an absolute online class. And so, but they still had to get together. They still had to make the connection. We were still meeting with, Kurt came in and he did some stuff with us. And then we had some meetings where we met on together to overview their portfolios and stuff. But what at the end, when they did their portfolio, their presentation to me, the thing that they said over and over and over again, I had a small class, 4 groups, but out of 4 groups, 2 of them got new customers and speaks.
New best friends.
That's just outrageous. One of them was a flop, but that was maturity. And the other one, they got along great. But the idea, we got to be such good friends. And the presentations that they gave were lively, they were fun. And they were teasing each other. It was just a completely different scenario.
So the connection helped it kind of take some of the stress off, and then the nervousness, maybe anxiety of doing presentations.
Yeah.
Does anyone ever try and track like how many students became friends in your class? That might be something that we look at. I kind of throw it out there with a smirk, but like really, maybe that's a goal. More friends. Rockford's fight song, huh? Sarah.
I took a page out of this book and I did this semester, but instead of actual time for them to meet to do the lab, it was time for them to meet collectively to go post lab questions. So they each did their lab separately, but then they can come back and collaborate, and they have to send in like a 1-page summary answering set prompts. Well, from that, it was meant to be a support system, because I kind of grouped them based off their availability as well as, and from there, they started reaching out to each other to study across the class, like, hey, anybody want to get together, go over some topics, stuff like that.
Collaborative reflection. That's a good one. I know that we often will do a reflect individually on it, or I'll reflect with you and we'll reflect back and forth, but peer reflection obviously is a big one. And Canvas does have the peer review tool. I know it's Elizabeth's favorite tool. It is a little clunky, but if it's something that you want to use in your course, I'm pretty confident in saying that I can help you with it. Okay. I will tell you this, that using the automatic assigns automatically with peer review is a little clunky. I would recommend that you assign manually. But peer reviews are another great way to kind of make a connection. Obviously, it's more fostered through the technology. You ever have used Canva to do any of those advertisements?
They all get on.
Do they? Okay, all right.
Yeah, they just go there.
Don't confuse Canva with Canvas.
Yeah.
Happens a lot. I've become accustomed to, if I get an email about Canva from somebody that doesn't use Canvas a lot, that they're probably talking about Canvas and vice versa. Canvas Studio is another one that I throw out. It's an underutilized tool for our students. And I know that some of you do have students create using Canvas Studio, but you can also have them post those videos that they make. Instead of doing a regular discussion, introducing themselves, they can do it as a video. What's better is that it plays with their mobile device really easily. So they can record that video right from their mobile device and upload it using the Canvas student app in Studio. There's access to Studio in the Canvas mobile and the student mobile app. Very easy to do.
I will say, I don't teach a ton, but when I do, I use that for some responses. The responses and the information I get when they do a video is way more in depth than when they're answering questions. It's kind of fun, and the interactions with the students commenting and replying.
Yep. And if you don't like that, there are other video tools that we can integrate right into Canvas. If you have used Flipgrid in the past, it's now called Flip. I feel like you've used Flip
I
a
have,
little
yeah.
bit. But there's additional backgrounds and cool things that they can put into that, and it's really easy for them to use that as well. So if you want to use more video for your discussions to try to make a connection, that might be a way as well. What are some other ways that you've seen students connect in your courses? I know we haven't hit them all. Doesn't have to be focused on technology either. It could be face-to-face, it could be asynchronous, synchronous, online, LOL, hybrid, everything in between. Carol.
I do surveys off and on that come with my textbook program. And we do them in class usually. And they get credit for being there in class. Well, I decided one day there were a couple of people that were not in class. So I had them partner with someone else in class, and they worked on the survey together, but they still had to survey everybody else. So the one that was on legs in the classroom could go around and talk to others, and then they shared their information and did their survey. Of course, this was supposed to be all in Spanish. A lot of times they get off on other discussions that aren't in Spanish, but at least they fill out the paper, so.
I like that one. So you have students create surveys.
No, it's actually already created
Okay.
surveys. And since sometimes I give them a list of questions and they can pick what questions they're going to use.
But what about having students create surveys
Yes.
and survey each other, whether it be about tips and tricks for success or about, the topic at hand.
Yeah.
Forms is a very easy, free tool that we have available to us that students can use to create surveys. It's probably not a bad idea. And I know that Elizabeth will agree with this, for students to learn how to create surveys, right? You do that a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, some of them are very
Yeah, so, but it's equal parts probably, acclimating themselves to the tools. Obviously learning how to do it, but also, gathering the data. Okay, what are some effective tools you can use to make sure people fill out the survey? Good luck with that. Everybody wants to know the secret. Need to make connections.
Thankfully, we haven't bust those things out.
No. Everyone loves Kevin's surveys. All right,
It does work though. For the classroom, when the students know the survey that they're making is gonna actually be reached outside of the class, they do put more effort into it. And then when they, when they see it then on the campus or in an email blast, they know they've had some contribution to that. And then one of my students saw something, and I don't know whether MCC was already doing this or whether it came after the survey, but they saw one of their ideas exhibited on an MCC billboard. And it created for them so much pride because they knew that their voice, or they felt their voice influenced that. So,
surveys, more surveys, and they can be embedded all over the place. And then they can kind of use that to talk to others and gather feedback and deliver feedback, things like that. So that's kind of an overlooked tool as well. Student spaces. You're probably well aware that the student spaces in Smith here and Ash, the library get used quite frequently. Do you ever encourage your students to use student spaces? Like they use them without us encouraging, why would I? But another piece to that is the connectivity available within every student space. So one of my examples is before we had all the student space with all the technology, there were some nursing students that were all huddled around a phone trying to watch a video. And I'm like, hey, there's a better way that you can do this. Okay, you can throw it up on the screen right there and you can actually cast to it. And I know that might not be like, well, how does that create connections? But if the students are aware that they can use the student spaces to maybe watch something for class and then maybe have a discussion, like, well, I don't have to huddle around your phone to watch it or your laptop to watch it. They can use the Teams app to easily cast right to it or just plug in via an HDMI. That might be another way to get them to gather, have some conversations, work on some things, stuff like that. So I would encourage you to encourage your students to use those student spaces. And the more they use those, the more we will then obviously work to create. So student spaces are maybe overlooked a little bit for some. And we are working for more student spaces. And if you have feedback on what could make student spaces more effective, Don, okay, that's why Don's raising his hand.
Can we get whack tablets?
Whack tablets, yeah. You think that would be helpful?
I think that would be helpful for students that are
To actually be able to hand and put those in the student spaces?
Yeah.
Would you teach them how to do it?
Yes.
Okay, deal.
I think if you can also put that as associated or adjacent from faculty spaces, then you have student spaces and then nearby, they know that's a place where they might be able to find a professor.
Okay, so if adjuncts wanted to work on campus, tell them to use the student spaces?
No, well, you could, but I think probably better would be to have close by adjunct spaces.
Okay.
If there's some connectivity or they're adjacent so that students are working here and then you've got a room where they know adjuncts are congregating.
Mm-hmm.
They might just run into somebody.
I mean, those could even be classrooms as well. Sometimes we overlook the classrooms, meeting spaces as they sit dark. You encourage your students to ink digitally. I know, Heather, you do some labeling in your class. One of the things, I actually gave a presentation last Thursday on this, is to not thinking about inking as having to write. And I know that writing out formulas is obviously something you have to do. But it doesn't always have to be a handwritten thing, because I know that a lot of our students lack input devices that are with a stylus. Things like Canva, things like Microsoft Whiteboard do allow for you to put a sticky note, a digital sticky note on there and type it in, or a text box, or put an image up there that represents what you're trying to say. So if you're worried about If I do a collaborative inking space with our students, they might not all have inking devices. You don't have to handwrite. Okay, it can be a text box. It could be, you know, like I said, an image or emoji, things like that. So. But a collaborative inking space is a great way to kind of get your students together in a different type of space as well. All right, student spaces, Canva, discussion, studio. What else? Anything else? We don't have to take the whole hour. But I also want to make sure that everyone kind of thinks outside the box and is able to share a little bit. I know that right up front, we often do a lot of those icebreakers, connectivity things, and then it kind of like, well, did you connect in that first week? Because if not, it's going to have to happen on your own. So maybe at a couple different points along in the term, you have connectivity pieces. Because that first week is all about icebreakers, right? Syllabus, icebreaker, get into it. And then do we circle back? Do we say, how are we connected? Where are we at? Or do you have somebody, do you have a support system? Maybe there's like a support system module 6 weeks in. That's like, are you making connections? What can I do to help? Heather?
So borrowing from Sarah's, it's great that we have offices next door. We steal each other's ideas all the time.
Good.
So she added the lab groups and teams, but she had a very nicely structured, she made it very clear like which weeks to expect interactions because online students do not want to interact with each other. So it's a battle you have to work through. So I copied that this semester, but I have weeks 1, 4, and 8, and I'm finding it's too much gap in between. They're not wanting to circle back around or they're forgetting. So next time there'll be content, but every 1 to 2 weeks in between, it'll be something fun, like share a random, whatever, so that they know that they have to get in there at least every other week. But it'll be that kind of personal building piece rather than a content based.
And I think that's good, more consistent along the way. I think being more intentional too about why you're doing icebreakers or why you're doing these connection things and making sure that like, hey, think about this. Think about what makes you most comfortable when you're in a class. Okay. Think about good course experiences. Yeah, you probably had a good instructor, but you also probably connected with each other. Share your experiences in your courses. You could probably think back to your college courses and people that you connected with in your courses and how important that was. Think about the friends that you've made and share those with the students. I think that, that's helpful as well. I try to emphasize with my students how important it is for them to not only ask questions in every class that they attend and put themselves out there, but also connect with somebody else or somebody's else, if I can say that, okay? And getting to know people in your class, it's hard to do. Okay? It takes a little strain and stepping outside your comfort zone. But not just doing icebreakers that first week, but continuing those as you go kind of continues to push that versus, hey, dog, sit, I'm going to teach you one trick. Not that they're dogs, but if you never come back to that, they're not going to remember it. They're not going to do it. So make it a part of your class. It's a culture. Yes, Michelle. Do it.
It's not having to do a lot of this stuff. Complain about when they do have to do it. And it's hard for me in my nature, social. And if I was an online student, I would never need to interact with anyone because to me, I'm doing a class. That's what, and I like the knowledge and the science of that stuff more than the people. Because that's the way I think. So I don't often think about trying to get students to interact online.
Yeah.
And when I do, it seems like a lot of work for me for very little payoff when I have them come back and say to me, why do we need to do this? I need to focus on memorizing the goals or whatever. So what's the right balance? I mean, especially coming up to the summer session, there's so little time and there's so much information. Just the hour it takes them to figure out how to use Teams and post something, they complain about, like, or they don't want, you know what I mean? The time crunch is always seems to be an issue, and I'm sensitive to that because I'm very.
That's fair.
Myself.
I think it's important to provide opportunities. Because there might be some students that do think that way. In most cases, you're not attaching a grade to it, but you are attaching an opportunity to it. And some students are not going to take that opportunity because they're not comfortable or for whatever reason, that's fine. Right. But I do think that it's probably a very small amount that are reluctant to do it and don't want to do it. And others might be reluctant, but then they do it and it's a positive experience for them. It kind of gets them out of their shell a little bit. I mean, ultimately it's up to you. This is a good question. Did you get pushback for any of this? But
I get a lot of pushback from the algebra. I don't get as much in the upper levels. As well. Homeworks get harder. They realize they need to actually work in group.
I think that's kind of where I was concerned. That's exactly.
Yes.
That's exactly, I was, as Michelle was talking, I was thinking, because I refer to myself, and everybody will look at me great, but I refer to myself as a closet introvert, because during the day, my work requires me to be extra. I'm an instructor, that's what I have to do, and I leave, and sometimes I'm exhausted because it requires me to do that. I love my quiet time, tracing time. And I'm also super grateful for the times when my instructors pushed me and said, I don't care, because you're gonna have to be able to do this. You may have a job where you can sit behind your computer, but at some point you're gonna have to call somebody and ask them for help. You need that skill. We cannot just say to them, well, you know what? So I appreciate the opportunity. Because again, everybody's ready when they're ready. We're all going on our journey at the pace at which we need to go on our journey. But I'm also mindful and grateful of those times when somebody has said, here's your comfort zone, here's your box. And if I allow an 18 to 22-year-old, or even a 25-year-old who's returning back to school, if I allow them to stay in their comfort zone, am I really doing my part as an educator to make sure that they stretch themselves? That's what I kind of see my role as being. And to answer your question, because I'm playing full out and exhausted when I leave class, I do not get pushback. They probably think I'm crazy, but I do not get pushback because they see me putting the same amount of energy that I'm asking.
I think this has been probably just one of the best sequences of this session so far. So thank you for bringing that up, Michelle. But I think it also comes down to what Don said and what I said about the intentionality of it. So we've all done a million icebreakers in our class, but how many times have you had it explained to you in terms of why the icebreaker is important for your continued success here? And making sure that you explain to them how important it is to make those connections with each other and step outside and get to know and strain a little bit, I think Jessica Snyder a couple of years ago said something that sticks with me is if I didn't make you uncomfortable at some point in this time here, then I didn't do my job. And that goes along with what you said. Not that you're trying to embarrass them, but you're also saying like, you got to step outside just a little bit, okay? And you might learn something in the process.
One of the exercises that I have in your classroom, I've not been able to figure out how to do kids, but my math classes, I generally have at least one, usually two sessions where I do what's called ambassadors. Each group goes into their own problem solving session, and it's a challenge for both. And then I call time and say, okay, now people elect one of their people to go be the ambassador, go to their groups and explain how to do that problem. And we rotate. In the middle of the course, I say, okay, this is an ambassador. They're come from a foreign country, they don't know you. Introduce yourself.
Yeah.
And then they go through the problem and they actually are, it's an exchange. And then we do it again. So we rotate through a couple. By the end of that, I have them, the people that were ambassadors, they all get extra credit. And the people that are not ambassadors, I give them the opportunity to get extra credit if they can list the name of everybody who was an ambassador. Right on the paper.
Sounds like you need to be more fluent with breakout rooms.
Yes, well, I'm trying to do breakout rooms and it's still the interaction problem. It's more an issue of thinking math and trying to interact and
Yeah,
So the training just to show people how to sync cameras or whatever they.
that too. So you're at a perfect storm where if you do that at the beginning of the term, they aren't familiar with Teams, and then you're making them be in breakout rooms. So that might be like a midterm.
Yeah, I don't do it first.
Okay, all right. Yeah. The technology gets in the way of a good time. All right, well, we're winding down here. Sarah is all over the place. Look at that. Well, Sarah, where did you go? Yeah, I'm impressed.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah,
I come from an elementary background, so I don't still apply to college students or not, but at that level, and even like my teenage kids themselves, they like the would you rather questions. So would you rather whatever, I mean, it's wide open, and then they can comment or want to put on whiteboard, they can answer with sticky notes, or there's so many different ways you could use that. It can be anything, you know?
yeah, that's very relevant. Would you rather college class edition? Please report back. But like, if we're thinking about that, it's kind of like on the edge a little bit, your students are probably gonna like it. And there's always gonna be a few that might not like it. Kind of how it goes, right? That's a good one. Any other strategies, ideas, tips and tricks to live by? There's been some good stuff shared here, and I appreciate that. Going once, going twice. All right, well, like I said, thanks for joining. Next month, we're gonna talk AI. I heard that it's a hot topic. And I plan to do it very similar to this, but I'm gonna invite everybody on campus. But obviously, there will be plenty of instructional talk because we are college after all, so. Awesome,
Kevin.
thanks for hanging out, appreciate it. Take some pizza.
Hey, Kevin,
Yo,
I'm looking forward to that Canva session too.
okay, I'll schedule a pop-up session. There's not one on the calendar yet, but I think it has to happen.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Over
Yep.
having commitments in the morning. So.